Yeah, we should have a good group today. There's lots of people coming on. I think a lot of people maybe aren't members of Fuelin, which is really exciting. So hopefully this answers a few questions that people have about Fuelin. And then also there's a bunch of pretty interesting questions from lots of different people about nutrition, which we'll try and get into. I've pretty much got like a 50-minute window for today, just because I've got to take my son to hospital or to an appointment. So we'll get through as much as we can. And obviously, yeah, the more interest there is in these sorts of sessions, and I really enjoy them, and hopefully you get a lot out of it, the more we can do of these sort of things. And to be fair, these weekly Q&As, they're all part of the Fuelin Autopilot, Copilot, or one-to-one tier, where every week we do 45 minutes to 60 minutes based around some sort of nutrition topic or science topic related to performance nutrition. So saying that, I'll try and manage the waiting room. I probably should just allow everyone to enter without going into a waiting room, but we'll get going. So yeah, my name's Scott Tyndall. I'm one of the co-founders of Fuelin. My background has been in professional sports, namely for the last 22 years, working across a number of sports such as professional rugby, professional sailing, professional ice hockey, and then since 2017 working in Ironman. The Fuelin program is the world's first training-based nutrition app. What that means is that it syncs directly with your coach's training plan. So if you have a training plan delivered through Training Peaks, Today's Plan, or Final Surge, then we will sync directly with that via API and provide you with every meal before, during, and after, appropriate to whatever the intensity or the duration of that session is, along with whatever your purpose is as an athlete, whether that be improvement in body composition, weight loss, or high performance. We have you covered. So we'll get into the questions that have been submitted. Sorry about the formatting on this. Okay, so first question, you read the first question and it sounds actually a little bit weird, and I'm not sure if Blaine is actually on this call. I'm hoping he is, because he asked a lot of questions. But he said, seems reducing carb intake to increase carb utilization is all the craze right now. Is there any evidence to support this approach? I think what he was actually asking here, or it could be two, it could be increasing carb intake to increase carb utilization, or it could be, it seems, reducing carb intake to increase fat utilization is all the craze. So let's go with increasing carb intake to increase carb utilization first. So there is evidence, although a lot of it is based around what they're seeing as the output as opposed to direct evidence. So they're not necessarily taking biopsies and seeing increased numbers of these transporters within the small intestine. But because there is a greater amount of carbohydrate oxidation in the muscle, it is inferred that there are potentially increased numbers of these transporters that allow greater amounts of carbohydrate to be transported across the small intestine membrane into the blood system and into the muscle, and that allows for a higher amount of carbohydrate utilization. So what we can see is that people who habitually, so on a daily basis, take in carbohydrates and higher amounts of carbohydrates, and those athletes that utilize higher amounts of carbohydrates in training in appropriate sessions, so i.e. higher intensity sessions, if we're thinking zone 3 or above, they will have improved carbohydrate oxidation rates. Now, if we flip that and we say, okay, reducing carb intake to increase fat utilization is all the craze right now. It's not necessarily right now. I think, improving fat oxidation and improving maximal fat oxidation is something that's been well researched and is supported by the research in terms of able to happen. If you increase your habitual amounts of fat and reduce your amounts of carbohydrate, then your ability to oxidize fat will be increased. Now, what that means is during lower intensity exercise, you will be more efficient at using fat as a fuel source. The compromise there is as you go into higher intensity exercise, if you have lower amounts of glycogen or have not been practicing with higher amounts of carbohydrate, your ability to oxidize or utilize those carbohydrates at the higher intensity will be impaired. So what you now have to think about is, what is your purpose in your training? Is it to be really efficient at burning fat at lower intensities and potentially, get better at that and improve metabolic flexibility? Or is your total purpose related more to using carbohydrates at higher intensities and going really fast? There's also the distinction here that just being a good fat burner does not mean you are going to lose fat. There is a difference. You still need to be in a caloric deficit in order to lose body fat, okay? No matter how good you are at burning fat or burning carbohydrates, it is laws of physics that you are required to be in a caloric deficit in order to lose fat. Okay, so there's three parts to that first question, which I hope has everyone at least understands from that perspective. Does anyone have any questions about that? I know it's probably a lot to take in, but it's a pretty big question to start with. Does anyone have any questions about that? And feel free to speak up because everyone's probably thinking the same thing. Oh, someone put something in the chat. Can someone read? Oh, I can read them. Colin. Okay. No, that's not a question from him. Anyone got any questions about that? Carbohydrate utilization, fat oxidation, going into caloric deficit in order to lose weight. No questions? Okay, we'll move on. Could you provide guidance on determining what zone to be listed for the intensity level of the workout? How do you recommend managing workouts that have multiple intensities in them? And this is Colin. I don't know if this was Colin Cook. He's a coach with Peak Tri Coaching, a great team on the East Coast. So
yeah, that's me, Scott. So
very good.
Maybe
Colin.
I should have taken this offline, but I just wanted to really ensure that when we're entering the zones that we're actually doing the right ones here. So I figured it was worth bringing up here.
Yeah. So Colin's team uses Fuelin, and so this is specific to a Fuelin question. So the way in which we do it is a coach would enter in the intensity in the session title within their training platform. So Colin is currently on Training Peaks, correct, Colin? Just nod your head.
No, Final Surge.
Final Surge, sorry, you're on Final Surge. So in that, he is going to put in either a Z2, at the simplest way, you put in a Z2 or a Z3. Z2 would imply that it is lower intensity and that the athlete will be able to, from my perspective, cope with lower amounts of carbohydrates and probably higher amounts of fat to provide them with the calories required to get through that session. Z3 or above is going to be higher intensity at or above race pace and therefore could require higher amounts of carbohydrate fueling. So from the coach's perspective, I think it also comes down to what are you trying to achieve with that, Colin? Are you wanting the athlete, even though it's got mixed intensities, are you wanting the athlete to potentially practice race fueling because there's enough high intensity in there and it will there or thereabouts be at their race pace for what they're trying to do in terms of racing? And so I think it can also come down to the coach here is as much like the way that we view nutrition is we're there to support whatever the training is that the coach is giving them. So if you're going to be giving them, if you're going to be denoting it as a race pace or high intensity session, depending on the duration of that session will then determine if we provide them with higher amounts of carbohydrates or not. And that will be on us. The decision-making around whether we provide them with the higher amounts of carbohydrates will be dictated by the duration of that session. So if that session is, say, 60 minutes or less, you're probably not going to get fueling within it anyway, okay? It's when the duration is extended beyond that time, and it is specific for a bike or a run, that we will provide then either that lower carbohydrate, higher amount of fat, or the higher amount of carbohydrate, and just push them into those buckets with the, and again, that amount of carbohydrate that is specific to the athlete will be dictated by their, what we call a carb capacity test. So at the start, when an athlete uses Fuelin, they will create what we call a carbohydrate capacity test. So they will enter in how much carbs they manage to consume during that session. And that will then bucket them into the lower, the middle, or the higher group. So somewhere between less than 40 grams an hour, we'll put them in the lower bucket. Between 40 and 70 grams is in that middle bucket. And then anywhere above 70 grams an hour is going to be into the higher bucket. And the athlete can work through those buckets by progressively logging their carbohydrate intake during those sessions that require them. Does that make sense, Cole?
Sure does, my man. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, so from Blaine, another question. Some athletes simplify the training or racing nutrition strategy to be any fuel works as long as you're getting enough calories per hour. Is there importance in choosing what source of calories or carbs you utilize, quality versus quantity? So again, this comes back to a little bit of what we just talked about with Colin, but also number one. So if you are working at higher intensity, at race pace or above, carbohydrates are going to be your favorite fuel source, namely because you're working at a percentage of your VO2 max or a percentage of your max heart rate that is going to dictate carbohydrates as the primary fuel source. Again, this is physiology, okay? If you're working really hard and trying to consume a lot of fat, the amount of oxygen that you're going to be consuming is going to be higher for that fuel source because it's harder for the body to use it. So you want to make it as easy as possible for your body to use the fuel source that you're giving, i.e. higher intensity is going to be dictated by carbohydrates. Now, one really important thing to think about is that as session duration increases, especially beyond 2 hours and certainly beyond 3 hours, you will have maximal fat oxidation and you will have maximal carbohydrate oxidation or utilization, regardless of what you're consuming. So if you're consuming high amounts of carbohydrates, your body is still using high amounts of fat just to provide you with energy as that session duration goes on. Okay. So I think a lot of people get confused with, I need to be eating this amount of fat to increase my fat oxidation during this session. No. Duration of the session is probably going to be the biggest determining factor in terms of when fat is going to be utilized during that. Now, your habitual diet, i.e. the amount of refined carbohydrates and the amount of fats you consume during the day and during the weeks, is probably going to have a bigger impact on your metabolic flexibility, i.e. how good you are at using fat as a fuel source versus carbohydrates at that sort of rest or low period. So your daily nutrition is going to have a huge impact on your ability to use fat as a fuel source at rest and at lower intensities, probably more so than what you're actually doing in training. And that's more of the recent research that's coming out, okay? So what that also implies is don't be afraid of eating during sessions, especially sessions that are long, because it's probably not going to negatively impact your ability to burn fat in the long run anyway. Okay, if you're an athlete with a terrible diet, what extra benefit is there to focus with Fuelin versus focusing on keeping the diet clean? Exactly what I just said then. So, and I hate the word diet clean because I don't even know what that means. But look, if you're eating a lot of processed carbohydrates, ultra processed, refined sugars, things like that on a daily basis, that is going to have a huge impact on that ability to utilize fat at rest and at lower intensities, probably more so than you going, oh, I'm going to eat a nut butter on this zone 1 ride. Okay. So your daily nutrition has a huge, huge impact on what is going to occur for you as a whole. Okay. And I think too many people are focusing specifically on what they do in race nutrition or in that training nutrition, as opposed to focusing on that daily nutrition. And it shouldn't be separated out, much like your race nutrition shouldn't be separated from training. You should be practicing your race nutrition in training to have the best race of your life. Same thing, you shouldn't be saying, oh, right, I can eat whatever I want, and then if it comes to training, I'm just going to eat fat and I'm going to be a great fat burner. It's just not the way it works. Your body doesn't know how to separate things like that. So cleaning up your terrible diet, if you want to call it that, what does that mean? It probably means reducing your total amount of ultra processed and processed carbohydrates, upping your vegetable and fruit intake at least 5 to 7 servings a day. And anyone who's on the Fuelin program will know that pretty much every meal is telling you to try and eat 2/5 of veggies. Colin certainly made that point to me, and thankfully he's told me that he's eating more vegetables than he's ever eaten. Simple things like that, and if you want to call that eating keeping a clean diet, then that's what needs to occur to start you on that process to become better at utilizing all these different fuels. Does anyone have any questions on that at the moment? Okay. I love the program. Just wondering where cheat nights are or meals come into the equation. And this is by Paul Kelly. So every Saturday night, we do give what we call a green meal. Now, we used to refer to it as a cheat meal, but we actually just changed the wording on that, and whether you want to get into NLP and all that sort of stuff, but we changed it to reward meal or enjoyment meal, I think it's called. So we want people to get out of the notion of you can cheat here, you can cheat there. It's more just about enjoying food and recognizing what are appropriate amounts of food and the appropriate types of food for whatever the work is that you're trying to achieve. So eating white bread in the morning before a hard session that requires you to eat a snack with around 30 grams of carbs, that is not good. It's not bad. It's just required. Okay, so I think getting rid of the notion of good and bad foods is really important. Obviously, consuming a hell of a lot of ultra processed foods on a daily basis is not good in that sense, but getting rid of that notion of white bread is bad for you. At particular times, white bread can be particularly good for you as well. So I think it's just thinking about, okay, on a Saturday night, if there's a green meal, go for your life, enjoy the food. Just think about what your big, why you're on this program. What are you trying to achieve? Does it go beyond just having a great race? Does it, does that why incorporate things like, you want to improve your health? So how do you then implement, the meals around that and the types of foods that you're eating on a daily basis? What is your view on fresh sourdough? There are lots of lunch options in the app, yet few contain sourdough. Would sourdough be the best option for normal meals instead of specific fueling for a session where white toast is an option? Yeah, it's probably more I just haven't put in sourdough as an option, and I will update this, Paul. Sourdough is very good. There are certain species within sourdough that have certain health benefits. So there's what's called a lactic acid bacteria, which has been shown to have some health benefits. In particular, sourdough from a FODMAP perspective is lower FODMAP than, say, a white bread or a wheat, a typical wheat toast. So some people who struggle potentially with higher FODMAP diets might be able to consume sourdough because of the process, the fermentation process by which it's made. You may be able to cope with sourdough as opposed to those typical traditional bread sources. So I'm all for sourdough. It's actually the type of bread I eat. I probably just didn't denote it in the app, but certainly choose sourdough if it's something that you enjoy eating. It is fine to consume. Training Peaks plans adjustments and synchronization with fueling plan. So I couldn't run or do a session. I want to log a reason and set in TP time to 0. Does my fuel intake adjust automatically to reflect this time change? Do I need to rerun my plan to show the 0 time? So what you would need to do is document 0 in Training Peaks if you want to keep it there, but you would have to rerun your plan to denote that the session actually had 0 time in it, because what we're doing on a weekly basis is comparing your week-on-week training volume to account for total calories supplied to you. And then what we're doing is then using whatever your current weight is to what your goal weight is and what the purpose, what your focus is, whether you're in a weight loss improvement in body composition program or if you're in a performance state. So yes, we do need to know what's actually happening with your training volume, and you will need to rerun your program in order to make that accurate. Okay, Sam Taylor asked, if your legs begin to cramp intensely halfway through an Ironman, is it possible to ingest enough nutrition or electrolytes to rebound quickly? You hear about this anecdotally. People will be cramping and then they will consume a certain amount of electrolytes, say sodium in particular. They'll have some salt sticks, they might eat some crisps, things like that, and they will be able to regain the ability to run. Now, in terms of the total amount that are required, I think we should backtrack here and think about why does cramp begin to occur. And I had this conversation yesterday with an athlete. So cramp is not explained in the science. No one can actually explain why cramp occurs. There's a number of theories as to why cramp occur. One of those is muscle conditioning. The second is hydration status. The third is muscle status, electrolyte balance, carbohydrate amount, and hydration status. So it's probably a combination of all those elements. And then there is the neural input from the brain connecting to the muscles that is also hypothesized as a reason for cramping occurring. So I guess it comes down to, have you managed your hydration appropriately? Have you, in terms of fluid balance and electrolyte balance, have you taken on enough carbohydrates? And have you done the training leading up to the Ironman to allow your muscles to actually function in the way that they need to function? If you do get a cramp, there are certain things that could be done. So ingestion of sodium could be a way of alleviating that cramp. There are other things. So ingestion of capsicum, the ingredient capsicum. So you can find this in things like hot shots or pickle juice, and that works apparently on the nervous system in the brain and can provide relaxation from the cramp. You can also use mustard. So hot English mustard is also something that a lot of athletes will use as a trick to try and alleviate cramp. And then you have things like this new product, BOA, which provides a shot of sodium into the buccal glands, is my understanding. I haven't seen or heard anyone had any like really positive experience with BOA, and I'm interested to know if anyone's actually used it and whether it works. But it is possible. I think drinking a lot, consuming carbohydrates, and consuming a lot of electrolytes, i.e. sodium, probably in the range of between 500 milligrams and 1,000 milligrams of sodium, would be your best shot to give you a chance of relieving the cramp at that point in time. Michael, who asked the question, I'm vegetarian and I have been my entire Ironman career. I do not get enough protein according to my coach and friends. Is there a good protein supplement that might help? I think without even going into supplementation, there are ways of increasing protein amount for vegetarians. And I'm assuming here that Michael is a lacto-ovo vegetarian, so he can eat eggs and he can eat dairy. So in that case, if he is comfortable eating dairy, then things that he could be doing is obviously Greek yogurt can be consumed, eggs can be consumed. You could then look at using other vegetarian sources of protein, such as tempeh, such as tofu and seitan. You would certainly be looking at consuming higher amounts of that in every meal and aiming for somewhere between 30 and 40 grams of protein per main feed, and ideally within some of the snacks, depending on his size. If he is, say, a 160-pound athlete, then he should be aiming for around 160, potentially up to 180 grams of protein per day. In terms of vegetarian sources, often it is just a case of having to eat more of the protein because of the amino acid composition and ensuring that you're getting the full array of the essential amino acids. In terms of protein powders that he could choose, again, if he's lacto-ovo vegetarian, then a whey protein isolate would be recommended. Something like True Protein WPI 90 would be my protein of choice. It is excellent, has very low lactose content as well because it is a whey protein isolate. If he was a strict vegan or a strict vegetarian with no dairy products, then the True Protein Vegan 85 is excellent. It's a tri-blend plant protein. So it's brown rice, pumpkin, and pea, which means that you get the full array of amino acids, including the correct amount of leucine per feed, which I believe in that product is around 2.6, might even be higher, 2.8 grams of leucine per feed. And that's per scoop. And usually what I'd be recommending for a vegetarian athlete is probably having 2 serves of that. So providing you with at least 40 grams of protein in a shake to just top up and try and get you to that amount that you require. When the other options for food options as well, certainly that I forgot, is beans. So beans and pulses. Yes, they are higher in carbohydrates and they are not as high in protein, but certainly the consumption of legumes is very effective for vegetarian and vegan athletes to get their protein consumption up. It will, of course, bump up carbohydrate intake, and that just then needs to be managed. Same with fiber intake will probably go up. And so during weeks or of higher intensity, or certainly on race weeks, you need to manage that. Welcome, Sam Taylor. I just answered your question. When not in race season, should I switch to my nutrition focus to body composition as opposed to performance focus, even if I'm a satisfactory composition? This is from Sherry Brown. So the way we work it in Fuelin is that depending on the athlete's focus, you can choose weight loss or body composition versus performance. And the way I get athletes to think about that is that if you're going to be in a body composition / weight loss focus, then be prepared for total calories to be a little bit lower versus performance, where we will be giving you more carbohydrates and certainly more fat to allow you to perform at the amount of volume and intensity of training that you've got. So it's not to say that you're going to be underfueled. It's just saying that in order to improve body composition and weight loss, you are going to be having to be in a caloric deficit, or what we perceive to be a caloric deficit based on the training volume that you've got. So in Sherry's case, I think, there are differences in the total amount of protein and fat that will be given on the body composition program versus the performance. I think, Sherry, if you're in off-season, select off-season, keep it at performance focused, and just focus on just enjoying the off-season and training the house down is what I would say. If your body composition is satisfactory, and again, that's probably a loose term. If you're happy with your body composition, then just leave it as performance and enjoy eating as much as you can whilst maintaining that, healthy relationship with whatever your body comp is. So that's actually all the questions that were supplied. I'm happy to go through, for the next 15, 20 minutes, we can go through some live questions if you got it. I did want to highlight that we have introduced what's called the pilot program, which excludes these live Q&As from the program, but it certainly makes it a little bit more palatable in terms of price. So that's based at $29 a month on the annual program. If you're not on the annual program, then it is $39 a month. But as I said, what we're trying to do is open up Fuelin to provide the same level of service to everyone, but at a price that is hopefully more in line with Training Peaks, Today's Plan, and Final Surge sort of pricing. Cool. Okay. I will stop sharing and we can get into some questions if anyone's got any. Does anyone have any questions? Please ask some. Come on, Colin, you must have a question. Start the ball rolling.
Hey, this is Eric. How you doing?
Very good, Eric. How you doing?
Good. I must have not submitted it correctly. I did put a question in, and it really had to do with around 2.5 hours. I think I'm burning about 2,000 calories between biking and running, and I just been playing around with gels and protein mixes, and I just was curious, is there a baseline of something that I should use for calorie intake at that amount? Because up until an hour or so, my body doesn't really feel like it needs anything, or it hasn't. I've started to take more calories, but it really is crossing that 2 hour threshold or 2.5 hour threshold that I really know that I need something. I'm just wondering what I should be taking in and how much.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't be waiting for 2.5 hours before you start taking in stuff if you want to feel good and if you want to recover really well from those sessions. So
Yeah.
I think your point to the 60 minutes is absolutely right. And probably for a bike session, anywhere up to 80 minutes, you could probably get away with, depending on the intensity, probably get away with it. And for a run, somewhere around that 70-minute mark is where we tend to leave it. But then after that, I think it's an opportunity to actually fuel your body and practice that. Now, whether that is, if it's lower intensity, Z1, Z2, use lower amounts of carbohydrates, a little bit of fat, but provide yourself with calories. You're going to feel better. As I said right at the start, what you're doing in your daily habitual nutrition is going to have a far bigger impact on, your ability to oxidize fat, to utilize fat, to lose weight, all that. I think so many athletes go into these sessions and think, oh, beauty, 2.5 hours, I'm going to burn 3,500 calories, not eat a thing. You're going to finish 3.5 hours and you're going to feel absolutely dead. You're then probably going to eat ravenously throughout the rest of the day and just undo whatever you did. Like you see it all the time. Athletes will come out of a 2.5 hour ride and then go and smash 2 pizzas. It's like, well, you might as well not have done 2.5 hours and actually eaten a salad and a nice piece of chicken. You would have had better effect in that sense if you're trying to control weight and body composition and stuff like that. And then also to that effect, if you're doing a 2.5 hour fasted ride, like what are you trying to achieve with that would be my question. Like,
so I eat a lot before that. I always will have a ton of calories before that. I was just wondering, burning that amount of calories.
So are you at what intensity are you talking about?
So in that time, what I've basically used as a baseline just to keep me from feeling miserable is 2 gel packets that are 90 calories a piece. I'll take one at hour and 15 minutes, and then another one at hour and 45 minutes or thereabouts. And then in between all of that, I'll basically, I guess probably around an hour and a half, I'll have a protein shake. Will be mixed in with they're called
yeah.
A
protein shake? I would not.
It's not a protein shake. It's like Vital Collagen mixed in with basically just to get the calories.
I wouldn't be doing that. You'll probably go rancid at 2 hours. You're asking for a whole lot of GI complaints. So I guess the question is, Eric, is what intensity are you talking about here? Are you talking lower intensity sessions?
It's pretty high intensity. I mean, the bike and the run, sometimes I'm sitting around 140 heart rates, but then I'll push myself harder and I'll get myself up into the 160s.
Yeah, so if you're doing that at 2.5 hours, then you want to be practicing taking on carbohydrates, and rather than thinking about, you can think about calories per hour, but I'd be thinking of grams per hour of carbohydrate intake. So, you taking in what did you say, 35 minutes?
Basically one every hour and
one every hour. So you're taking
just for simplicity's sake, let's call it 300 calories in a 2.5 hour workout.
Yeah, so you're taking in 100 calories. So let's say 100 calories an hour. Yeah, like you're way underservicing yourself if you're trying to work at a high intensity. Like you're effectively taking in 24 grams of carbs. So someone like Colin, for instance, if he was doing that session, we'd be pushing him up into 90 to 120 grams an hour of carbohydrate. So and he's going to feel good doing that session. He's going to recover really well from that session. He's going to have hunger under control probably for the post-session fueling. And he's going to understand, like, okay, I need to probably consume some carbohydrates with that meal, depending on what the second session is, but he's going to be focused on certainly a high amount of protein, the appropriate amount of fat, and then a moderate amount of carbs. If he doesn't have a follow-up session, if he's got a second session, he'd be probably going pretty heavy on the carbs as well. But because he's fueled for the intensity and the work required during that session, he's going to come out of that session much better. And he's also doubling up with practicing from a practical standpoint, the nutrition that he's going to use in a race. So if he's going 2.5 hours in that session at Z3 or above race pace, 140 to 160 beats per minute, he's practicing in training what he's going to apply in a race. So it feeds itself forward. At the moment, if you did what you're doing in a race, like I would, you'd probably struggle. I hope you wouldn't be doing that in a race because you're going to feel pretty terrible.
Yeah, I guess I've done it already, but just not for a long anything past a sprint. So
yeah, like what do you weigh? You look like a pretty big guy, 170, 180 pounds.
210.
210. Okay, so I mean, man, you should be filling yourself up. You've got a lot of power output potentially, and energy is what you consume, and that's how you push it out in terms of power and power of speed. So
way under serving myself during workouts.
Way under, and potentially consuming some products that maybe don't serve, like Vital. You don't need collagen during a session, man. Like if you look at the evidence for collagen, then majority of that's going to be taken 45 to 60 minutes before, resistance-based training sessions specific to trying to improve collagen synthesis.
The only reason I took it is it mixed well and it was light and it wasn't heavy in my stomach. I was getting calories. I figured it was something that was going to turn into good energy. Yeah,
I would protein as a fuel substrate for you to use. Like I would keep it fairly low, and then again, depending on the intensity of that session, if it's lower, you're going to be using fat predominantly, and if it's higher, you're going to use carbohydrates. But as I said, once you get over that 2.5-3 hour period, you're just using fuel. It's a calorie game at that point in time.
How about honey as the carbohydrate? I've been reading a lot on that.
You can use honey. It's obviously high in fructose, which can cause some athletes issues because of the FODMAP element to it, and can delay some gastric emptying. Maple syrup again can be used. Things like that can be used. It's just trial and error and making sure that you can actually cope with that as a product. But again, I would say, are you going to use honey in a race? And if you're not, and you're doing race specific sessions, practice with the fuel that you're going to use in a race. Like there's what we call the SAID principle. So that's specific adaptation to implied demand. Whatever you specifically want to do, then practice it, because then you'll get adaptation to that. And that will help you actually push out whatever the demand is. So it's no different from training. Like, whatever your coach is giving you is specific to what they want you to achieve. And it's no different with nutrition. Everyone should be thinking about their training nutrition in the same way, and their daily nutrition. What am I doing to try and maximize the output? The input is going to maximize the output. And so you're thinking about that all the time without becoming neurotic about it, obviously. Cool. Great questions, man. Look,
thank you.
You can reach out to me. You can reach out to me.
Just never got along before for back-to-back training sessions, and it's just it's a new world. So I'm just trying to figure out what it keeps me going.
Nah, for sure. You can reach out to me at scott@fuelin.com if you want to follow up on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Cool. Sarah, I know you had a question, and I didn't put it in, Sarah Dessol, because I wasn't quite clear what you were asking. So I left it out.
So yeah, no worries.
Can you put your camera on, please?
Well, okay. I don't like to be on. So, okay. My question, when we rerun like a session, so like I get up insanely early and do a lot of my sessions. If I have to flip them into the evening, or if I have an evening session that I have to flip into at night, many times the fuel will change totally. Like I've gone from a green run to a no fueled run, in the morning. And so
in session, or the meal before?
In session. And so I'm just trying to figure out why. I mean,
the duration changed?
No, just the time of day. So I've had I've had sessions that have been in the evening that I flipped it, the evening plans changed around. So I had to flip them to the morning, and then like fuel goes away altogether. And I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, and I can plan and do that, but lots of times of it just, it's tougher. It's tougher to like fuel before those mornings, especially if I like work out like at 5 a.m. It's
So,
tough to
yeah, just to clarify, you're saying the fueling before changes or the fueling
the
in?
force changes. So, and I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
don't mean to
Sorry, no. So that makes sense. I thought you were saying the in-session fueling changes. So
No, that's actually, I have had in-session fueling change from like a green session at 7:30 in the evening. If I've flipped it till the morning, it switches to like either a low or no fuel whatsoever.
the only way that would change is if you change the intensity or the duration of that session. It shouldn't happen. So I just need you to ping me if that happens.
Okay.
The reason the pre-session fueling would change, say from the morning to the evening, is because obviously you've eaten throughout the day. So we'd be applying the carbohydrates throughout the day. And if you've had enough leading up to it, we would probably downgrade, because obviously if you're doing a morning session and the first meal of the day is say green, but then you change it to the evening, you may have eaten 200 grams of carbs before that. And so that green meal would be downgraded potentially to a yellow or a red. But the in-session fueling shouldn't change unless you've changed the intensity or the duration or both within that session. So, okay. Yeah, please take screenshots of it.
I would not ever change that, for the wrath of Lauren. So
no, that's cool. Yeah, definitely do that. So
other quick clarifying question too, like what do you suggest for like those early morning sessions that there's like this morning I had a super early bike ride, but then like a green snack in the morning. I can't get up at 3.
So what's really cool about this actually, and again, some recent research, obviously there's a digestion part to this. So like whatever you eat before the meal, like, again, if you're trying, like, this is the whole fasting training thing. If you want to do it in fasting, consume that meal 10 minutes before. You'll be an hour into the session before some of that starts to really get into you. So, and that's part of gut training. Like for athletes that really struggle with being really full, like, what have you got? You're like, I look at Lauren's training me at the moment, like there's 20 minutes warm up. Like sit on the bike and eat. Like I've done that. I had an overnight oats. Like it had 100 grams of carbs in it with that. I'm sitting on the bike warming up, eating my oats, and everyone's looking at me weird. And it's like, but it is what it is. I obviously do that on a trainer. Don't do that on the road. Yeah. But you can eat, like put the toast on, put that down, get changed, start to get ready, get your trainer all set up, grab the toast, get a table, put your overnight oats near you. Eat that. If you want to have some gels or bananas, just do it. Like you're still getting it into you. Like it's not perfect, but you're still getting that 100 grams of carbs in. You then will potentially either do the session without any fuel, but that fuel that you've consumed before is still going through your system. Like I think what I do hear from athletes is they're like, oh, I've eaten that and now I've got to eat this. And now your body doesn't work like that. Like it doesn't know when things are necessary starting, stopping. It's sort of an evolution and a flow. It's the same with fat oxidation going to carbohydrate oxidation. Like it's a sliding scale. You can be using a lot of fat, minimal carb, and then it's equal amounts of fat, equal amounts of carb, and then it's all carb. It's getting more and more carbohydrate and less fat. And then, when you go to the very top, okay, you're probably 100% carbohydrate oxidation for a period of time. And then we start to go long duration and it's back to maximal fat, maximal carb. So like the body goes through these waves. And I think that's how we got to be thinking about it. And as I said, what you do on that daily basis is certainly going to have a massive, and I'm only going to say this from a personal perspective. Obviously, I haven't really made it known, but I am training for a 70.3 and I've got it in like 10 weeks. I finally bought a bike, Colin. Got my bike yesterday, but I can tell you now, like if you don't have structured nutrition, I have no idea how you do this, guys. Like honestly, and I'm not saying our program is perfect. All I'm saying is if I didn't have like the color code in front of me to tell me how much I'm allowed to eat, I would be overeating so much because I'm often so hungry from all this training. Like doing 2 sessions a day and 3 hours of training is so foreign to me that it's like, it's so weird. And like, if I didn't have a cap on what I could actually consume, and I'm still eating like 350 grams of carbs a day, but I've lost, 4 and a bit % body weight. It's just like 300 to 500 grams a week. And so it's no different from following a training program. You're just following a structured nutrition program. And it takes effort. I am not going to lie. It takes effort. Much like getting on a bike or jumping in the pool every morning takes effort. Eating the right food takes a little bit of effort. And, if you want the quick fix after a week, it's certainly not the thing for anyone, I don't think. But you've just got to be prepared to put the effort in. Get organized with your food. Like Sarah was saying there, like, the night before you make your overnight oats. You have your toast, easy to get to. You have your lunch ready. It's not meal prepping per se, but it's just being organized to say, I've got the stuff in the fridge to make the appropriate food that I require. And that's how you got to be going about it, I think.
Thank you. I was just going to
Cool,
say,
Sarah. You're doing great as well, by the way. I look at all your stuff and you're crushing it. So it's really cool. Sherry, did I answer your question okay?
Yes, you did. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you. And Sam, you might have just missed yours. We were talking about cramping.
Yes, I got on a little bit late, and so I didn't hear anything you said. So forgive me
That's
for that.
right.
I thought it started at 7:30. So
that's cool.
But I actually have another question.
You'll be able to see the replay on YouTube, so you can watch it then.
Yeah, I actually have another question, if it's okay.
Yeah. Far away.
So right now, just to kind of lose some of that holiday excess weight. I'm doing like a low carb, diet just for a couple of, I'd say, maybe a couple of months to drop, 10 pounds or so. And my concern is, of course, when you do your high intensity workouts, you just don't have the same energy level without those carbs. But so the temptation is, go ahead and carb up for the high intensity workout that you've got planned. But then does that throw your system back into wanting to burn carbs, and you kind of reset your, you get into, they call it ketosis, and you're burning a lot of fat and you're losing that weight. But if you carb up before a high intensity workout, does that throw off your low carb, your fat burning mode that you've gotten yourself into? Does that make sense, the question?
Yeah. So we pretty much covered all this right at the start.
You did. Okay. All right.
Then that's cool, because it
don't
is
go over
really
it again,
good.
please. I got in late.
But I will answer one part of that. So in
Okay.
order to be in ketosis, you need to be consuming probably less than 50 grams of carbs a day.
Right.
Okay. So
Right.
not many athletes do that, and they don't do it very well. And I think you got to think, as I said, Sam, in order to lose, just going low carb might increase your ability to burn fat, but it doesn't mean it increases your ability to lose fat. You still have to be in a caloric deficit. You could be in a high carb diet in a caloric deficit, you will lose fat. Okay, you will lose that holiday chub if that's what you're worried about. But just being in a high fat, low carb diet could actually really impact your ability to train. So I think you got to think about what you're trying to do. If you're already in season, you've got a race coming up, just put yourself in, again, the way I'd structure it with Fuelin is you'd be in a caloric deficit, but you would have appropriate amounts of carbohydrates to manage your sessions. And you would definitely be eating, much to like Eric's point, like you would be eating in those sessions, certainly supplying yourself with what we call exogenous carbohydrates. So externally consumed carbohydrates to fuel those sessions appropriately and allow you to produce the power you need. Again, I think there's a big misunderstanding in what improves body composition, what increases fat oxidation, what improves, performance. And from the simplest standpoint, if you want to lose weight, you've got to be in a caloric deficit. If you want to improve your ability to burn fat, yes, you could be on a higher fat, lower carb diet. If you want to perform at your best, you need to be consuming carbs. So it's sort of picking out from those three things what your priority is. That's how I'd be going about it.
Thank you.
That's cool. Look, I think the science around all this is really cool. Honestly, the implementation is actually, it's not that hard if you follow a system. It's all about systems and just doing the same thing consistently. That's what will give you the best results. You know, eating really well on a day-to-day basis and then fueling your sessions appropriately based on the duration and intensity is what will get you results. It's not super sexy. It's not like, oh, there's this magic like food you can eat and suddenly everything's going to be great, but it works. Okay. It's no different. I'm sure, like, you know, first time you worked with a coach and you got on a bike, you didn't do a 4-hour, you know, Z2 session, did you? You probably built up gradually. It's, you know, it's no different with nutrition. It's just got to do it consistently. Guys, I'm going to have to jump off if there's no more questions. I hope this helped. I know it's fairly informal and it's sort of, you know, just a bit ad lib, but it's real questions from real athletes. And I think they're really interesting to hear what people are thinking. There's certainly a lot of consistent themes that we hear around, you know, fat burning, carbohydrate utilization, weight loss. And I think, you know, if you've got more questions or you want, you know, a little bit more information, then certainly feel free to reach out to us and do that. Have a look at the website, check out what we're doing. If anything's unclear, certainly reach out to me, scott@fuelin.com. Be happy to help you with any questions you may have. So thank you all for joining. If there's nothing else, we will say good night to you all. It's probably 8 o'clock for you, Kyle, is it?
That's right. Bedtime.
Bedtime, exactly. Sleep's the other thing. But yeah, really great to see so many familiar faces and then a lot of new faces. So thank you all.
Thanks a lot, Scott.
At the end of the call, actually, if you can just fill in the questionnaire and let me know thoughts, and if you've got follow-up questions, you can fill that in as well. That'd be really useful. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Scott. Bye.